Yo, guys, how's it going, guys? So sorry I couldn't be here. I'm gonna quickly show you how to graph a quadratic function in standard form. There's gonna be two ways in which you can do this. Um, Please make sure that you're writing this on your notes. Do not just watch the video and not write anything. Please go ahead and pause the video if you want. Go ahead and write everything that you see on the screen. Um, and then whenever you're ready, you can unpause it and just watch the video and write everything that you need to write. So just kind of to go over what we need to go over, our objectives today are going to be two of them, which the first one is writing a quadratic equation in factor form and use it to identify the zeros of the function it defines. So basically, we're going to use the skills of factoring a quadratic function to graph a function. Okay, there was a whole reason why we did that. The second objective is going to be to identify the key features of quadratic function, which is something you're going to do on the homework, or not homework, on the activity that I'm going to give you right now, and graph a quadratic function written in standard form. So when something is not factorable, you need to find a different way to graph it, which is what I'm going to show you on the second example. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Cool. So the first one says we can use factoring and the zero product property to find the x-intercept solutions, that's another name for it, of a quadratic function. Graph the quadratic function by factoring. So f of x equals x squared plus 2x minus 8. I'm going to go ahead and factor that. The first thing that you need to know when it comes to factoring is that we're actually finding the x-intercepts. So if you remember from the previous class, to find the x-intercepts, we need to plug in 0 for y. In this case, f of x represents y. So I'm going to have 0 equals x squared plus 2x minus 8. Okay, my computer is a little weird, so it's not writing that great. So I'm going to go ahead and do the emoji method. I know that's 1. I'm going to multiply my a times c, which is going to give me -8. My b value is 2. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to -8 and add up to 2. That's going to be 4 and 2, or 4 and -2. I'm going to divide those by my a value, which in this case is 1, which means it doesn't really have an effect on it. So my factors are going to be 0 equals x plus 4 and x minus 2. Okay, so those are my factors. What I want you to do different in this case is you're going to go ahead and solve for the zeros or the solutions of the equation. What does that mean? Notice that my equation is set equal to 0. I'm going to go ahead and set each one of those equal to 0. So x plus 4 equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0, and then just go ahead and solve for x. Well, that's -4 on both sides, so x equals -4. That's plus 2 on both sides, so x equals 2. So what you just found are the x-intercepts of your function. So I can go ahead and plot those into my graph. So again, my x-intercepts are going to be at -4 and 2. So -4 and 2. Okay, so I have 2 points. If you remember, I always said you only need 2 points to be able to graph anything. However, when it comes to a quadratic function, you're missing the most important point, which is the vertex. Without the vertex, there's no way you can figure out how to graph or how to sketch this function. So we need to go ahead and find the vertex. Now, because we do have those two x-intercepts, I can find my vertex manually just by using, just by counting. Now, what do we know about our vertex? Well, my axis of symmetry passes through my vertex. And if you know, and if you remember, my axis of symmetry passes through the middle of my function, which is exactly in the middle. So all I have to do is basically just count. 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. And I can see that at -1, it's my middle, which means that at -1, I have an axis of symmetry. Now, how is that going to help us find my vertex? Well, if you remember, your axis of symmetry is the x value of your vertex. So because you have the input value of your vertex, you can go ahead and find your output. Remember, a function is just like a vending machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let x equals -1, which is my axis of symmetry, and I'm going to go ahead and plug it in into my function. So f of x equals x squared plus 2x minus 8. I'm going to go ahead and replace every x for -1. So that's going to be -1 squared. Notice that I put parentheses around my x. Please do that or it will mess up your answer. Plus 2 times -1 minus 8. Okay. You can go ahead and do this manually just by using pandas. Just make sure that you're careful, or you can just go ahead and click or go ahead and put all of that, the way you're looking at it, go ahead and put that all into your calculator. Please make sure that you're doing it. Don't just look at my answer. That way you're practicing with the calculator. So my answer is -9, which means that my vertex is a -1, comma, -9. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put that into my function, -1 down -9, and my vertex is right there. And now I have all of the points that I need to be able to graph this function. Okay. On your assignment, you will be asked to find all the key features. So just remember how to do that. Okay. To go into my second example, okay, I want you to just look at what I'm going to do. Don't write this down yet. I'll let you know when to write it down. So let's just say I want to graph this function the same way I did on the previous example. Okay, well, that means I have x squared minus 6x plus 10. Again, do not write this down unless you really want to. I'm going to go ahead and erase it in just a minute. So let's just say I'm going to do the emoji method on this because I want to find my x-intercepts. Well, I know that that's 1. I'm going to go ahead and do my emoji method. 1 times 10 equals 10. My b value is -6. So now I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to 10 and add up to 6. Well, if I look for the factors of 10, well, what multiplies to 10? 1 times 10, 2 times 5, 3 doesn't work, 4 doesn't work, 5 already did, 6, 7, it doesn't work. So the only two factors that I have, it's either 1 and 10 and 2 and 5. There's no way I can get two numbers that multiply to 10 and add up to -6 out of 1 and 10 and 2 and 5. So those don't work, which means that your function, it's not factorable. So how can I graph it? We're going to go ahead and use sort of like a formula to find my vertex. Okay. Please make sure from now on, start writing stuff down because this is very important. To find your vertex, or not necessarily your vertex, to find your axis of symmetry, we're going to use this formula, which is x equals, so it's helping you find x equals -b over 2a. We're going to go ahead and use that formula to find my axis of symmetry, which will eventually help me find my vertex, which is the most important point we need. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Now, what does b and what does a mean? Well, if you go back to your standard form, y equals 8x squared plus bx plus c, that is where we're getting our a, b, and c. Our a value in this case is 1, our b is -6, and our c is 10. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that into my formula. So x equals negative b, which in this case is negative 6. And again, notice how I'm putting parentheses around it. Divided by 2 times a, which in this case is 1. You can go ahead and simplify this. This is going to equal 6 over 2, which will eventually equal 3, which means that your axis of symmetry is 3. Now, again, I have my input value. I know what my input value is going to be. I can use that input value just like a vending machine to plug it in and get something out. So I'm going to use my function g of x equals x squared minus 6x plus 10 and plug my axis of symmetry in for x. So now I have g of x equals x. Again, notice how I put parentheses. Square minus 6 times x, which is now 3, plus 10. Again, you can do this by hand, or you can just put all of that into your calculator, which is what I'm doing right now, plus 10. So g of x equals 1, which means that your vertex is 1, or sorry, not 1. Your vertex is your x value, which you know is 3, right? Comma your y value, which you know is 1. So your vertex is at 3, comma 1. I'm going to go ahead and put that into my graph. If I'm going too fast, please make sure that you're pausing this video, coming back. I mean, do whatever you need to do. You have the technology to do it. Cool. I know that my axis of symmetry is also going to pass through there, which I already know was 3 because the formula gave it to me. And there you go. Cool. All right. So there's a few things you could do. Remember that we need 2 points to be able to graph anything. I have the most important one, which is my vertex. So I'm good with that. And let me make it a little bigger, right? I know that my vertex is right there, which means that now I got to find a different point. You could do 2 things. You can find a convenient value to plug in. So you can let x equals 4 or 3, whatever you want. Or there's one of the points yet that you can find right away. I'm going to go ahead and find my y-intercept. If you remember how to find your y-intercept, you should know that you let x equal 0. So you plug in 0 for x, and then you calculate it, and it gives you, you calculate it, and it gives you your y-intercept. So I got g of x equals x squared minus 6s plus 10. And I'm going to go ahead and plug 0 for x. So that's going to give me 0 squared minus 6 times 0 plus 10. I know 0 squared equals 0. Negative 6 times 0 equals 0. So I'm left with 10, which means g of x equals 10, which means that my y-intercept is 0, comma 10. And you can see a trend. It doesn't matter how many times I plug in 0 to a standard form, your y-intercept is always going to be your c value. Okay, so make sure you try to remember that. Anyways, I found another point, which is 0, 10, 0, 10, sorry, which is right there. And because I have an axis of symmetry, I can go ahead and mirror that image. So if it's right there, then it must be 3 spaces to the right as well. And there is my quadratic equation. So 2 ways you could graph this. If it's in standard form and it's factorable, you can go ahead and find the zeros, the x-intercepts, graph that, find your vertex automatically, or find your vertex manually. Or if it's not factorable, you can use the x equals negative b over 2a to find your vertex and then find a convenient point. So those are the 2 ways you're going to have when you're graphing a quadratic function in standard form. Okay, see you guys.